getting the logic just right with dates in your application can be hard, as we've seen in previous episodes. This gets even trickier if you start looking at two different platforms. So if we're, for example, if we're doing .NET as your backend on a server, and then on the front end you might have JavaScript in a browser. Different representations of dates, which can cause some problems. So let's mash on that.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Asp.Net Monsters. In today's episode, we're going to continue our battle with our old nemesis, dates. And times.
Yes, we are. Dates and times. Actually, just dates this time.
Okay. Well, times will come for you later.
Your time will come.
Ooh, very well done.
We could go on for days, but we shouldn't. So, continuing on the example that we've talked about in previous episodes here, I have this very simple public holiday object that has a name and a local date, which is a structure from NodaTime that represents just a date, no time component, and it doesn't have a time zone with it. It's just a date within wherever you happen to be. So the examples of that would be, well, if I run it, we can see some of our examples of upcoming public holidays in Canada. Loading. We have random August day off coming up here soon, Labor Day, and Thanksgiving, which, yes, is in October.
Yeah, where it should be.
Exactly. Okay, so this was a Razor page application. So here it was all done server side, and we're still dealing with dates in .NET, the .NET representation of that local date. Now what I've done is I've created a view sample. And this is going to be interesting because today so far I've spent half my day doing Angular, the other half of my day doing React. So it makes sense that I would try to record a video doing Vue in the evening. We'll see how it goes. But here I have just a simple Vue application. I'm using Vuetify to render out a list here of all those dates. Nothing fancy, very similar to what we had before. But let's just see if we can add some logic to this Vue app now. Oh, and the Vue app is just calling our API endpoint that returns those dates. So that's what we did in the last episode here. We had a controller that queries for those dates and returns the list of all the public holidays from the database and serializes it as JSON. So if we look at the logic of the Vue app, it's really quite simple. This isn't like a full-blown Vue application. I've just embedded some Vue here inside of a Razor page. So I have my markup, this is Vuetify stuff here, the v-app, the app bar, the main, and then I have this list. So this is the important thing. I'm just iterating over a list of holidays and rendering out a list item for each of those with the name and the date. And the Vue portion of this, I'm just pulling in Vue and Vuetify from CDN. And this is my whole Vue app here. I create a new Vue instance and initialize Vuetify, and then when this Vue object is created, I call fetch on that public holidays endpoint, grab the response, unJSONify it. That's definitely not the right way to say that, but
deserialize, perhaps?
That's the word. And then just assign it to my array of holidays here. So that's the whole app. But maybe I want to start adding some functionality JavaScript side here. So what I was going to do is add a computed here that says I want to grab all of the dates that are after today. So we'll just give that a try. Const today equals new date would be how you get today from JavaScript. And I have my list of holidays, so I want to filter it based on, I guess we would say h.date is greater than or equal to today. Yeah, and then instead of binding my list here to holidays, I'll say after today. And we'll just see what happens. So I will refresh this page. recompiling Razor, and I got an empty page. That's unfortunate.
I don't know. It's kind of what I expect from 2020, like canceling all holidays. That seems about right.
This is true. This is true, especially if we got JavaScript involved. I mean.
All right. Well, what's going on there then?
Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at network tools and just confirm that we're actually getting back what we think we're getting back. So when I refresh this page, it should make that call. Oh, I just haven't zoomed in. So there's my call to public holidays, and it returns a response. And that response, it's tiny, but you can see here it has name, New Year's, date, 2020-01-01. But that's a string, although that's the response from the network call, so we kind of expect that. But let's just confirm what that date actually is compared to what we're trying to compare it against. So if we go to our code, I'm just going to add some console login just to take a look at what's actually going on here. Back to Visual Studio. Okay, so today would be console.log today. And console.log, well, I'll do console.table on this.holidays.
Look at you go.
I've taken my debugging up a notch here with console.table. Okay, so there's my date today that got formatted as like a full date. So it gives me the day and then the time and what time zone I'm in, or what my offset is. And then here's my table of things. So if I click on each of these, we see that they're actually still just strings, and that's the problem. And kind of the first thing that usually trips me up with trying to compare dates that come back from a server call is that it's still just a string. Like it doesn't get, when I deserialize that JSON, things like numbers and booleans and strings get deserialized into those types, but dates don't, because how does it know that that string happens to be a date?
Right.
The JSON parser has no way of knowing that. So we need to add some logic that actually goes and does that for us. So
a bit of a shortcoming of how JSON works.
Indeed. It really only has those very short list of primitive types that it understands. Okay, so what could we do instead? I guess we could do a map here. That's when we're loading this. That said, instead of just setting the holidays as is, we could say map this to a new object. So we would say for each holiday, I'm going to map this to a new object. We had ID equals ID name and date. Let's try new date, and we'll pass in the date that was.
Probably need to put an H dot in front of some of those things.
Sure do. H dot name. Thank you, Simon. Okay. H dot. There we go. Let's see what that gives us. I'll maybe put that console.table back in there. Let's see what we got this time.
Well, it didn't solve it. It looks like we got dates.
We did get dates. I was expecting to see something in the UI there, though, so maybe we got our filter logic wrong. Let's just double check that real quick. Date is greater than or equal to today. Oh, return. Actually, in the computed, we do have to return the thing. Otherwise, how would we know what it's supposed to be doing? Okay, so we actually do have dates now.
Cool.
But is Thanksgiving on a Sunday, Simon? And Remembrance Day on a Tuesday?
Well,
I guess Remembrance Day is always on a different day, but
yeah, but
Christmas isn't on a Thursday or on December 24th typically.
No, unboxing day, not
Boxing
December
Day.
25th. Looks like everything's off by 1. But can we just add a 1 to everything?
Well, we could, but then it might depend on what time zone I happen to be in, if that would actually be the right thing.
Yeah, that's true.
What happened here is it shifted everything -7 because of my current -7 or 6, depending on the time of year,
Daylight savings time,
part of the
yeah.
year it is, based on where I currently am, based on my regional settings in the browser.
Mhm.
So I can't just initialize a new date, JavaScript date, and pass it in a year, month, day, which is actually the ISO standard format for specifying a date is the 4-digit year, 4-number year dash 2-number month, 2-number day. But if I just use the JavaScript constructor for date, that ends up offsetting the thing. So this is a second thing that I get tripped up with often, is this thing where the dates start like shifting plus or minus 1 as I go from the client to the server, because the server is often, even if we're not dealing with just dates in this exact specific example, often the server is in UTC time and the client obviously isn't most of the time. So you end up with this shifting of the date happening. So what we usually need to do here is maybe pull in a library that can help us with this a little bit. So one that I've been using a lot lately is Luxon, which is kind of I think it's maybe managed by the same or maintained by the same people that do Moment. It's kind of an alternative library to Moment. Biggest difference, I think, between Moment and Luxon would be that the Luxon dates are immutable. So you can't actually change the instance of the date. You just create new instances of them when you do things like add days to them or use any of their functions. So here what I might, yeah, me too. So what I might do here then is I would say I'm just pulling Luxon down again from CDN. So if I wanted to just expand out what I already have here, I would say, okay, instead of saying new date, I'm going to say luxon.datetime dot from ISO date. I really should have brought up the tutorial here, or the docs, before just guessing what that was. Yes, from ISO. That was close, but not exactly right. Okay, so that's going to give me a Luxon date, but now the thing that I was trying to compare it to is a JavaScript date. So I have two options here. I could change this to use Luxon, or I can change this back to a JavaScript date. If I was doing well, we'll try that first. I would just say to JS date. So it's kind of a big long string of method calls and whatnot, but that should give me a date that's the right date now in the person's current time zone. Let's just double check that that actually worked. Okay, we do have the correct dates now. There's still the times there just because of how we're formatting it out. But that kind of brings me to the next thing, is I'd kind of like a convenient way to maybe format out these dates. And so this is where one of the approaches I've been doing now is to, instead of just, having this kind of inline object that I'm mapping to here, like an anonymous thing, actually define a class for this. So what I would do here is I would say, this works a little better even in TypeScript, but I'm just doing kind of standard JavaScript here. But I would say class holiday. Let's see if I can get this syntax right. I might need your help, Simon. Constructor. So here I would say this dot name equals, I'll just initialize it to an empty string. Undefined maybe initially. And what I do is I'll do a static method here first of all, just for loading it from data. Static from data. Pass in essentially what is like the DTO, the data transfer object, the thing that just has those properties on it. And then what I'll do is I'll say const holiday equals new holiday. I'll initialize a new instance of this class. here. And then I'll say object.assign holiday. So with object.assign, it's basically just copying all the properties from the source over to the target. Target being the new object I created, and the source being the data that was passed in. And then I'll say holiday.date, the thing that I need to actually apply some logic to, and that's where I'll do whatever I use. So here I'll say lexon.datetime. So data.date. So that seems a little bit like overkill because there's only 2 properties on this class. But when you have like a whole bunch of properties, most of them are just strings and numbers and map fine. This maybe saves you a little more time doing the object.assign and then return holiday. So if I got that syntax right, now what I can do is when I'm doing my map here, I would just say return new holiday.
Would you do new holiday, or would you do the static method call?
Sorry, yes. My bad. Thank you, Simon. I'm so glad I have you here today. It is late, and I've been writing a lot of code today, and my brain is definitely reaching the end of its coding ability. Okay. So now that we got that, now that's a Lexon date, so let's go in here and we'll just adjust this. I think it's just lexon.datetime. Did I create a new date time? I had this.
You had like a 2.js, is that what you're thinking of?
I'm trying to get today, which is just datetime. That's what I was looking for. Just so that this comparison still works here. Okay, let's see if that comes through in a way that makes sense, what we were expecting. Okay, it's formatted a little differently. The default toString for, I'll zoom in a bit there, Simon.
It looks like the dates are right, though.
Yeah, the dates are right, and the default toString is to return like the ISO formatted date and time. And this is where it's kind of nice now that we have a class, is that we can start adding some functionality here. So I could say formatted date. Return this dot date. Okay, it's should be a Lexon date. So I do format. I had this all written out and have forgotten it. Format in your date time. So yes, to locale string is the one I was looking for. That just does, and it'll follow whatever my regional settings are, which is always kind of nice to respect the whatever region that person is in, because sometimes we put months and days in the wrong place in some parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now over in here, instead of doing item.date, I can say item.formatted. Nope. What did I do wrong?
Doesn't look promising.
Oh, if I'm defined. I must not have got that logic right.
It's probably going to be up in your class, yeah.
I had .format in there for some reason, which was definitely not correct. That was when I was guessing at the method name, which I don't recommend you do. There we go.
Hey, that looks great.
It's formatted in my local format. And so that's all I had for today's episode, where we're dealing mostly with, how do we deal with that date once we get it from the server? There's a little bit more that I want to cover on if we wanted to try to also now send that back to the server. Mm-hmm. And we'll cover that in the next episode in this series.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, which is, I guarantee you, today. And we hope that we will see everybody on our next episode, which is today plus 7 days. So we'll see everybody then. Bye.
Bye.